Right, okay, so in today's video we're going to have a look at solving simultaneous equations. So we've got two equations here, and simultaneously just means we're going to be solving two of them together at the same time. So in both of my equations I've got an x and I've got a y, and we've got to find the value of both of them. So I've got two equations here. I've got the first equation, which I always just label equation 1, and it's a good little tip here just to label them up. So we've got 3x plus 2y equals 4, and the second one here we've got 4x plus 5y equals 17. Now if we can get one of the letters to be the same value or the same coefficient in front of them, then that is going to help us to then eliminate one of those variables. Now we'll have a look because we've got the x's at the front, which we can underline, so we could make those the same, or we could make the numbers in front of the y the same. Now it's just personal preference, but I've always just looked at that y value there, the one in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more as we go through it, but I'm just going to make the numbers in front of the y there the same. So in my head I'm just thinking, well, 2 and 5, they can turn into 10. So the top equation, equation 1, if I was to times everything in that equation by 5, then the number in front of y would be 10. So I'm going to times that top one by 5. And the one below it, the equation with the 5y there, I'm going to times that equation by 2, and that'll also allow me to get a 10 in front of the y there. So what I'm going to do is, to the side, I'm just going to completely rewrite both these equations, but I'm going to times the top one by 5 and the bottom one by 2. So if I times the top one by 5, we get 15x plus 10y equals 4 times 5, which is 20. And the one below that, timesing it by 2, we're going to get 8x plus 10y, and 17 times 2 is 34. Now I have two options now. I can add these equations together, or I could subtract them from each other. Now if you think about 10y and 10y, if I was to do 10y add 10y, that's going to make 20y. So they're not going to disappear if I add them together. But if I do 10y take away 10y, then that is actually going to eliminate them, and they're going to disappear, and we're not going to have any y's left in our equation. So the way to remember it is, and this is just personally how I've always remembered it, is these little signs here in front of the y's. If the signs are the same, you subtract. So the SSS rule, some like to call it. So same signs subtract. This is going to change if the signs are different. If the signs are different, we're going to add, and we're going to have a look at why we do that when we actually have different signs there. But if they're the same signs, subtract them away from each other. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take them away from each other. So I'm going to put a little minus sign here, and I'm going to do the bigger equation take away the smaller equation. Now, obviously we've got some different numbers going on here. We've got a bigger number at the end in the second equation, but we've got a bigger x value here in the top one. So it doesn't really matter which way we do it. I'm just going to go for the top equation there, and I'm going to take away the one below. So 15x take away 8x's leaves me with 7x's. The 10y's are gone. 10y take away 10y is 0. They're gone. That's the whole point of what we're trying to do here. And then we've got 20 take away 34, and 20 take away 34 is negative 14. So we've got 7 lots of x, 7 lots of whatever x is equal to negative 14. So in order to solve this, to find out what 1x is, we're going to divide by 7. Just normal solving equations here, and we get the value of 1x therefore has to be equal to negative 2. Negative 14 divided by 7 is negative 2. So there is our first answer. We've got x equals negative 2. Now in order to solve this, we also have to find out what y is. So we just need to substitute this value of x into one of these two original equations up here, 1 or 2. Now it doesn't matter which one you choose. I'm going to choose to sub it into 1, not for any reason, because they both look very similar equations, but I'm just going to sub it into equation 1. So I'm just going to write that down. I'm going to write sub x equals negative 2 into, I'm not going to write equation 1, I'm just going to put 1 there. Okay, so it's quite nice once you've labelled it up, you can just shorthand write in a lot of these things. So subbing it in, we've got 3 lots of x. I'm just going to circle that here at the start. 3 lots of x, so 3 lots of this negative 2. 3 lots of negative 2 is negative 6. And you can write this working out down if you want. I just think that one's okay just to do in your head. So 3 lots of negative 2 is negative 6, plus the 2y equals 4. And now we just need to go about actually solving this. So we've got negative 6, add 2y equals 4. So just like normal solving equations here, we want to get rid of this negative 6, so we can add 6 to both sides. And if we add 6 to both sides, we get 2y equals 4 plus 6, which is 10. And then solving that just like we did with the x value, dividing both sides by 2. So divide by 2 to get the value of 1y, and we get y equals 5. There we go. So we've got our value of x, same sign subtract, made the coefficients of y the same. We've got our value of x is -2, subbed it into equation 1, although we could have subbed it into either, and then we solve that again to get our value of y. Let's have a look at another one where there's an add and a subtract in our two equations. Okay, so here we have two more equations where we've got a negative in there. We've got 3x minus y equals 4 for equation 1, and we've got another equation with a positive, so 2x plus 4y equals 26 for equation 2. Lovely. So again, I'm just going to have a look at these y values, these y coefficients, the number in front, and we're going to try and make them the same. This is quite an interesting one because in fact I don't really have to change both here because I can make that a -4y on equation 1. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to times equation 1 by 4, and this happens sometimes where you only actually have to change 1, sometimes we have to change 2, but in this case I can make it a 4 there. Now it doesn't matter that it's -4, I don't have to try and match it to make it +4, I just have to make the number the same, the actual 4 part. Okay, so I'm just going to make it -4 in front. So if we times that all by 4 and rewrite it, 3x times 4 is 12x minus 4y, and 4 times 4 is 16. There we go. And then we're not changing the bottom one, so all I'm going to do is rewrite that below so that I've got these grouped together. So 2x plus 4y equals 26. Okay, there's my two equations. Now we subtracted them before, but if I think about this logically, if I was to do -4, the one on the top, and then subtract +4, so take away 4, I'd end up with -8. So those y coefficients, or those values of y, are not going to disappear because I'll have -8y if I was to do that. So let's get rid of that because we're not going to actually be able to subtract these. So when the signs are different, we're going to add. So different signs, add. Okay, so when they have same signs, subtract, different signs, we're going to add them together. So let's write that. So 12x add 2x is 14x. -4y add 4y is going to go to 0, they're going to disappear. And then 16 add 26 is 42. There we go, not the nicest one here, particularly if it's non-calculator, but 14 does go into 42 a nice amount of times. It goes in 3 times, so dividing by 14 gets us x equals 3. And there's our first value. So not negative this time, quite nice to sub that back in. So if we sub that back into an equation, let's pick one. Sub x equals 3 into, and you can pick one at random. Let's sub it into equation 1 again. Let's have a look and see what we get. So let's sub that in. So x equals 3, if we sub it into 3x here, 3 lots of 3 is 9. So we get 9 minus y equals 4. Now you can do this logically. You could think, okay, well 9 take away something equals 4. That number has to equal 5, doesn't it? But if we solve it just like normal, let's get rid of this number so that we know the answer is 5. But let's have a look. Let's take away 9 from both sides, and we get minus y, negative y, equals -5. 4 take away 9. And then therefore positive y has to equal +5, or we could divide both sides by -1 or times both sides by -1, but ultimately there we are going to get the opposite value. If negative y equals -5, then positive y equals +5. Okay, which we knew logically from the start here. When if you look at that, you've got 9 take away 5 has to equal 4, doesn't it? So we've got x is 3 and y equals 5. So I'm going to label it equation 1 and 2. And just take a quick thought here that these symbols are the same, aren't they? They're both a negative there, so we're going to apply our same sign subtract. We just need to make sure those coefficients of y are the same again. So similar to question 1 here, we've got a 5 and a 2, so we can make that equal 10. So we're going to times the first equation by 2 to make sure that 5y becomes 10, and the second equation by 5. I'm going to write them to the side again. So 3x times 2 is 6x, so we have 6x minus 10y equals, and then -31 times 2 is -62. So -62. And then times in the second equation. So 4x becomes 20x minus 10y again. And that equals -18 times 5 is -90. Again, don't forget, you can take your time to work out these multiplications. Just be very careful with them and make sure you get them right. So we've got the same signs, so we're going to subtract them. Okay, so I'm going to put the minus in. Now I'm going to do the bottom one, and I'm going to subtract the top one. I could do it the other way around if I want, but I want to get a positive 14x down here rather than a negative. It's doing 6 take away 20, so I'm going to do the 20x take away the 6x. So the bottom one, 20x take away 6x is 14x. The negative 10y's disappear, remember that's why we're doing it, negative 10y take away a negative 10y. But now I've got to work out negative 90 take away negative 62. And when you've got negatives in here, I always just write the working out down to the side, so negative 90 take away negative 62. Okay, so remembering obviously when we've got a double negative here, that's going to turn into a plus. So I've got a negative 90 add 62. Okay, if you've got a calculator, if you haven't, just be very, very careful when you're doing this, but negative 90 add 62 gives us a value of negative 28. Okay, and that equals negative 28. Okay, so let's just put that value in. 14x equals negative 28. And then dividing by 14, 14 fits into 28 twice, so it fits into negative 28, we have negative 2 as our answer, so x is negative 2. And then again, just subbing that into one of these equations, they've both got a negative in, neither of them look particularly nice, so let's just sub it into equation 1 again. So sub x equals negative 2 into 1. And let's just write this out very nice and carefully. And if you want to, obviously write out your working out here, but we're going to sub it into the 3x part. So 3 lots of negative 2 is negative 6. So negative 6 take away 5y equals negative 31. Just subbing it in there. Add the 6 over to both sides, just like we've done on previous questions, and we get negative 5y equals, and add 6 to negative 31 is negative 25, remembering it's getting closer to 0 there. And then we're going to divide by negative 5. So in this final step, we're dividing by negative 5, which is going to be the same as dividing by 5 over here, but that's obviously going to flip the sign. So we're going to have y equals, and negative 25 divided by negative 5 is just positive 5. So y equals 5. And there's your answer for that one. Okay, so on to the last example, and this is really quite a nasty one. Can't imagine you getting one much harder than this, so let's just have a look at this one. So let's label it equation 1 and 2, and you've probably noticed in equation 2 there we've got this negative 5.5 here, so we're not going to get a very nice answer here, but we'll treat it in exactly the same way. So we're going to get the y coefficient to be 6 here, so with 3 and 2, so let's times the top one by 2, and the bottom one by 3, and we'll rewrite them. So 8x becomes 16x, plus 6y equals 2 times 2 is 4, so 4, times the bottom one by 3, so 9x minus 6y equals negative, and let's times that by 3, we get 16.5. And now we can just go about adding them together because we've got our different signs there, so we're going to add them together. So 16 add 9 is 25, so 25x, and that's going to equal, let's add 4 to negative 16.5, we get negative 12.5. Well, that's not very nice there, but 12.5 is half of 25. But if we just go about dividing by 25, what would it look like? It would be x equals negative 12.5 over 25. Not very nice at all, but if you do get this scenario and you don't spot that 12.5 is half of 25, you could times the top and bottom by 2 just to remove the decimals, and we would get negative, what would that be, 25 over 50. That's a little bit easier to spot there, that simplifies down to a half. Okay, so that also equals negative a half, which we can write as a decimal if we want as well. We can write it as minus 0.5. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as negative 0.5. It's not a very nice one here, but we get x equals negative 0.5. Now let's sub that in. I'm going to sub it into equation 1 just to avoid using that negative 5.5. I'm going to sub it into 1, let's hope we get a nicer value here. So negative 0.5 into equation 1, we could do that working out to the side. You've got 8 lots of negative 0.5. Now 8 lots of a half is 4, so 8 lots of negative a half is going to be negative 4. So we get negative 4, add 3y equals 2. Add 4 to both sides, so add this 4. And you get 3y equals 6, and then dividing by 3, you get y equals 2 as your final answer there. So not very nice, but if you do get horrible values like this, I mean, practice with your calculator. It could be non-calculator or calculator, but there's just a way that you can tackle these not so nice simultaneous equations as well. So I've got a selection of questions for you to have a go at. Here they are. Okay, so here's 4 questions to have a go at. Just remember, same sign subtract, different signs you add, and you need to make that coefficient of y the same first. Okay, so pause the video there and we'll go over the answers in a sec. Okay, so going over this first one to start with, I'm going to do these quite quickly. I'm going to times the top one by 5 and the bottom one by 7. So that's going to make 15x plus 35y, and 18 times 5 equals 90. And then we've got 28x plus 35y equals 77. Same signs we're going to subtract. So it's up to you which one you do here. We don't get the nicest of numbers, but 28 I'm going to do on the bottom. Take away 15x is 13x, and 77 take away 90 is negative 13. Divide both sides by 13 and we get x equals negative 1. So there's our first solution. We just now need to sub that in. I'm just going to sub it into equation 1. So if I sub it into equation 1, we get negative 3, add 7y equals 18, add the 3, and we get 7y equals 21, and then divide by 7, and we get y equals 3. And there's our second part of the solution. Onto the one below, we've got a double negative in both of these, so we're going to subtract again. But let's see, all I need to do is actually times the top equation this time, times it by 3. So let's rewrite it. 15x minus 3y equals, and 18 times 3 is 54. And then we don't need to times the bottom one, so it's just 1x minus 3y equals negative 2. So same sign, subtract. I'm going to do the top one, take away the bottom one. So 15x take away 1x is 14x, and 54 take away negative 2 is 56. We'll end up adding that to. Divide it by 14, and we get x equals 4. 14 fits in 4 times. So there's our first solution. Let's sub that into, let's have a look. I'm going to go for equation 1 again, it just looks a little bit nicer. So 5 lots of 4 is 20. Take away y equals 18. And again, you can apply a little bit of logic here. Look, you can just go, oh, it's got to be 2, hasn't it? So 20 take away 2 is 18. But if we take away 20 from both sides anyway, we get minus y equals minus 2. So positive y has to equal positive 2. And there's our second solution for that first one, that second one there. On to this third one, top right, we've got different signs, so we're going to add these. And we're going to make that coefficient of y 6. So let's times this by 2 and times this by 3. So times in the top one by 2, we get 8x minus 6y equals 22. And for the bottom one, we get 30x plus 6y equals negative 3. Now adding them together, we get 38x equals, what's that, 22, take away 3 is 19. Now this isn't very nice actually, we've got quite a different scenario going on here, and if we divide both sides by 38, we actually get x equals 0.5, or a half. So we've got our first decimal answer going on in one of these questions, so we've got a half for one of our answers, 19 divided by 38, and don't forget for something like that, you can always write it as a fraction, 19 over 38, and then simplify it. 19 is half of 38, so it ends up being 1 over 2, which we can leave as a decimal 0.5. Okay, so something we didn't go over in the examples there has come up. Now let's have a look at subbing this in. So let's sub it into equation 1. So I'll sub it into 4x. So 4 times a half is 2. So 2 minus 3y equals 11. Take away 2 from both sides, you get negative 3y equals 9. And then divide by negative 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, so y equals negative 3. There you go, probably the worst one of the bunch there. Let's have a look at this bottom one. So quite a nice one because we only have to times the top one by 4 there. So let's times the top one by 4, we get 12x plus 4y equals negative 16. The bottom one's going to stay the same, so 3x minus 4y equals 6. And then again, different signs, so we add them together, we get 15x equals, and let's have a look, negative 16, add 6 is negative 10. And again, not a very nice one here. If we divide by 15, we get x equals negative 10 over 5, or negative 10 over 15. And if we simplify that, we get negative, divide top by 5, we get 2, divide the bottom by 5, we get 3. So negative 2/3. Now all we need to do is sub that in. So we need to sub negative 2/3 in. Let's write out that solution. We have x equals minus 2/3. as our first solution. And we need to sub that into one of the equations. So I'm going to pick to sub it into the top one. It's not too bad because it's 3 lots of it. So if we sub it into there, 3 lots of negative 2/3 is negative 6/3. And minus 6/3 is 2, so it's negative 2. Okay, so just writing that down, we've got 3 lots of minus 2/3, which is negative 6/3, which comes out as negative 2. So negative 2 plus y equals negative 4. Add 2 to both sides, and you get y equals negative 2. And there's your final answer. Okay, so that wasn't the nicest one there to finish on, but there are all your answers for those questions, okay? So there's those 4. Well done for sticking through with that. That's simultaneous equations. If that was helpful, if it was useful, please like, please comment, please subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.